Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the November 15th meeting of the Budget and Facilities Committee. We have a pretty short agenda today, so hopefully this won't be one of our longer meetings. First, we're going to cover the 5-year plan for our facilities, which has been prepared by the district's architecture firm, John Grillo. We're then going to talk about maintenance of elementary playgrounds. We have a discussion about a brief update about transportation operations. We'll open the floor to new business and go right to community comments. So with that, I'm going to give the floor to Kathy O'Hara, who is going to cover the first agenda item of the 5-year plan.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good morning, everybody. So I have our architect, John Grillo. He's with JAG Architect. The district has been working with John since 2017. Over the last couple of months, John and Jim Restano have been going to all of the buildings and assessing the conditions of the buildings and looking at projects that would need to be done. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the 5-year plan. That it's a draft that has been put together, and we wanted to discuss the priorities. So what we did is we asked John, and also Jim looked at it as well, to look at the suggestions and then rank them on a scale of 1, 2, or 3. We figured we could take this committee through it and see if you all agree with it or if we should change things. So, John, would you like to take us through some of it?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. As Kathy had alluded to, we had done a walkthrough of all the buildings, and normally this is done. The state education department back in 2000 started what's called a building condition survey. And every 5 years, districts were required to put this building condition survey together, walk all the buildings, answer the survey questions, which is about 120 questions each, and then upload it online. In 2020, the state said, you know what, instead of all 724 school districts in New York State submitting it the same year, let's break it up by 20% or 1/5 of all the schools do it each year. So your building condition survey is really not scheduled to be done until 2023. So Jim and Kathy and I walked the buildings, and Jim and I walked, I think, 3 or 4 times total. And we looked at some of the big ticket items, the biggest priority ones. The questions on the building condition survey go into, everything under the sun, from roofs, boilers, windows, doors, storm drainage, sanitary. We focused on some of the big ticket items. So I put together each one of the projects to the left, and then just a little commentary on each one. And then just to get us started, I prioritized 1, 2, or 3, 1 being the highest. And I've always usually been under the assumption when I'm looking at a school building is that the building shell, health and safety, and ventilation have got to always be the number 1 priority. And that's really how I broke this down. Not saying that a 3 is not a big priority, but it just gives us a starting point. So it's easier for us to change instead of leaving that entire column blank. And then we have to kind of figure out each item. So I don't know if we want to go item by item. There's about 60 items or so, or if we want to focus on one building. I don't know how you want me to walk you through it. You can let me know.
Sure. Adam, do you have a preference?
Yeah, is it sorted right now in any particular way? Is it by building, or?
It is by building.
Okay, so do you want to just kind of walk us through the buildings and maybe just go through the higher priority items, and maybe if there's anything you think that's also that we should know about that's not a high priority item?
Sure. Kathy, if you could scroll down just a little bit.
Sure. I just wanted to mention one thing. There are costs associated with all of these projects. I just hid that column because I wanted us to focus on the actual project that's being proposed.
Yeah. And great, Kathy, can you circulate this document to us, even possibly during the call, so we can maybe look at it?
Sure.
And ask questions?
Sure.
So the main priority 1 at each building is a couple of things. One, it's broken down into 2 categories. One is univent replacement. We were asked to look at what is the feasibility of replacing all of the older unit ventilators in the district? Mostly those are original to the building. And what we would recommend there, if we do replace, what I've been doing the last 7, 8, 9 years, when I replace a unit ventilator, I put in a new unit ventilator that can not only provide heating and mechanical fresh air ventilation, but cooling as well. This eliminates the need for school buildings to be putting in a window air conditioner or a ductless split. You have condensation and all that kind of stuff. If the unit vent was replaced not too long ago, I never want to see a district spend money on something that still has a fair number of years left on a useful life. So if there's a unit vent that was replaced in 2010, 2012, I'm recommending that stays. And only in those cases, we would recommend putting in a ductless split unit into the room as well. We then also looked at your large spaces. You know, and I could break these out eventually. What would it cost to air condition the gyms or the cafeterias or the large group instructions as well? And then I have a separate line item, which is just for, Kathy, if you could scroll just a little bit down further, the next number one. And I call that ventilation. I have at each school and I just call it ventilation. These are rooms throughout the district that have either been broken up over time. I have a one big classroom. I need 2 small group instructional spaces. So we build a wall down the middle. Now the ventilation isn't really doing what it's supposed to be doing as per the original design. Or what I also look at is, for example, an office space. An office space that has a teacher or a principal or somebody in there. All they are required to have is some sort of heat, which could be fin tube, baseboard heat, and fresh air is via an open window. That is still code. That is still current code. You can do that. I don't love that because on wind-driven rain, very, very cold days, you may not open the window. So now all you have is this, you know, you have your fin tube heat. Some of them have old steam radiators. When you're really not bringing in the fresh air that I would love to see, even though when I stress this is to building code. So those are the rooms. I broke those out separately. And as you can see at the high school, I think there's like 30 rooms or so that we could really improve ventilation. I'm talking about the individual offices in a guidance suite or the individual offices at the main office, those kind of spaces. So I really broke it down into 2 separate items. The other number 1 items at the high school is the rest of the roofs. Since we've been there, we started replacing roofs at the high school and throughout the district, actually on an as-needed basis priority. We have 3 more roofs or 4 more roofs scheduled to be done in the summer of 22 at the high school. They're currently up at the state awaiting approval. And then the last number 1 priority at the high school is just the running track. The edges of the running track are starting to fray a little bit. Over time, they come up, but you could repair the edge and what's called a structural spray. You can kind of coat the track with a structural spray and reline it. Much cheaper option, and it'll buy you another 5 to 7 years, as opposed to my option 2 there below, which is a full-blown replacement. That is a long-term fix, but if the track is only, let's say, 8 to 10 years old, you could easily structurally spray it and get another 5, 6, 7 years, depending on how often the community uses the track. So I gave you both options there on the track. My recommendation at this point would be the option 1, which is the buy another 5 to 7 years. And those were my item 1s at the high school. At Souza, basically the same thing. Ventilation, we had 15 rooms. I'd love to see improved ventilation. And then the other item is for the univents, rooftop units, as well as ductless splits in the newer univent rooms. So at Daly, we had a couple of items. We have some exterior masonry that we need to address as part of the next round of roof replacement. I have the roof at Daly as an item number 1, which is recommended for replacement, as well as the 2 different items of ventilation, mechanical fresh air ventilation. 11 rooms at Daly need upgrade to the ventilation, and then the rest of the rooms are the older unit vents. So in Daly, you do have an old steam system. In some cases, we'd replace the old steam piping to go to a hot water, run new hot water piping. That's the only building where we're thinking about running new piping as well and do a conversion from steam to hot water. The other buildings, the other steam buildings are in good condition. Same thing here at Weber, and I think at Guggenheim as well. Ventilation is the #1 priority. At Weber, you see there's 23 rooms, and at Guggenheim, there are 6 rooms that we would recommend the improved mechanical fresh air ventilation. Same thing at Manor Haven. Starts to get a little repetitive. I'm sorry if I'm boring everybody at this point. And then Salem as well. And that really ventilation and roofs and then the masonry at Daly are really the #1 priorities, in my opinion, if we're looking to do long-range capital plans.
Can you talk a little bit about the process by which you identified these items and prioritize them, like how we got to this list?
Well, I walked the building as if I was doing a building condition survey. I bring my floor plans with me. I mark up all of the spaces and all of the classrooms, all of the offices, what the uses of each space. I looked at your last building condition survey, which was done in 2015. I removed projects that were completed within the last 5 years. I've done a fair amount with the district over the last 5 years through your normal capital budget. And then what I do is I identify each project. I put a cost associated with it. And in the building condition survey, they talk about the expected remaining useful life. And really what the state wants to see, if anything that can exceed 5 to 6 years, they don't even want to see, the cost of replacement. They use it as their 5-year plan. Now, since our 5-year plan would be 8 years, I'm looking at the projects, in my opinion, that are the highest priority, that makes the most sense. And unfortunately, in the world we're living in now, where COVID is such a thing, to me, improving and circulating air and bringing in fresh air has got to be a priority one. So it's really what I've done in all of my districts over the years in terms of priority. This doesn't include any sort of programmatic needs or educational needs in terms of building, maybe building principals would want to see science rooms or art rooms renovated. The building condition survey just touches on nuts and bolts. It doesn't look at any kind of any of the fun stuff that goes on in the school building, renovating the cafeteria, those kind of things.
Okay,
So
that's what I was getting at is, was there any like subjective type of planning or, conversations with administrators about, how they use the building and what's lacking? So it sounds like this is like very much like an objective, like property condition engineering type of study.
Correct, 100%. This is the boring stuff when it comes to a school building. This is the building shell. It's not what goes on inside the building. For example, I'd love to renovate all my science rooms, or I'd love to add a STEAM lab at all the elementary schools. That would come as part of this as a separate, where we could meet with the building principals, walk through their needs. I hate to use the word wish list, but their programmatic needs per se. And then we could put together budget numbers for that as well. Like I said, right now, this is the stuff that if you were a homeowner, these are the things you don't want to have to replace. You don't want to spend money on roofs and ventilation and asphalt and that kind of stuff. So we could address that as another topic, if by all means, if you want us to do that.
So can I, I'm going to put you on the spot, Dr. Hines. How would you view, obviously money is limited and we can only do what we can do, but as I guess as part of all of the processes that we're going through, how do you view, looking at if there's any, type of capital infrastructure that the school would need in order to support, the future vision, so to speak, and do we need to reconcile that with this type of, engineering planning that we're doing?
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. To answer your question, Mr. Smith, I think everything that John just articulated are some of the things we've been hearing, Jim and I have been hearing for quite a few years, certainly when it comes to ventilation, even pre-COVID. So the fact that this is in the forefront now as far as some of the things we need to focus on is great. I know Kathy said she didn't want to include dollar amounts, which I think is smart, but at some point we need to figure out how we're going to finance this for sure. But for me, this is a priority because, I think anybody would agree, and I appreciate what John's saying about we would love to have more STEM and STEAM labs and all that good stuff. But if we don't have the basic things functioning, as we found out when heating went down a couple of years ago, then we just can't do what we need to do. So this is priority list number one. The only thing I would say, though, I saw the tennis courts number 3, John. I have a hard time with that, but anyway.
Emily, go ahead.
Thank you. So I just wanted to echo what Dr. Hines said. So Kathy, I know you said that you didn't want to put costs, but I think for the purpose of planning, we kind of need the costs because I think we don't know. So clearly when we did our building survey, we did a walkthrough, John, of the buildings, the Board of Education with Kathy and with Jim Rostano. And the number one thing that we did here also was the ventilation and upgrading and discussions that we've had preliminary about air conditioning and what are the possibilities. I mean, these are requests that we had from teachers about getting air conditioning. We've had the requests from parents. So we in order for us to even start having this conversation or to actually decide, is this a priority of the board or we need costs? So what is it? Are we talking, $1 million that we can put in transfer to capital, or are we talking $20 million? So and is this a bond type of discussion? So this is what I think we need to start also have to include in our discussions.
Or it is definitely, it's probably around 60 million to do every single building is what the cost would be for the air conditioning. We had, the
Did you
bond,
say 60 million?
60 million.
Wow.
Yes.
That's with the electric upgrades?
Yes, correct. Right, John?
Yeah, so I don't know how much you want me to talk costs or.
Well, I could share it and show the costs if you guys would like.
Yeah, everybody put a seatbelt on because I don't want you to fall off your chair when you see this, so.
Well,
Can I also add that if we're talking about costs for this particular matter, time frame also, like how long this project will take as well?
Sure. So I can walk you through that.
Okay.
So everything on the list, including air conditioning and everything else, all 1, 2s, and 3s, comes out to about 65 million. That's everything. That's all in. That also includes big spaces. And I could pull those out. Big spaces meaning the gyms and the cafeterias and the auditoriums. I mean, if we said, let's just air condition the classrooms and the offices, I can give you that item separately. But
We'll
something of
that.
What's that?
I said we'll definitely need that number for just the
Absolutely.
classrooms. Yeah. They
are included. So this is worst case, and we can kind of back out big spaces if we say, we're not going to air condition the gym at this point. It's such an monumental undertaking that as part of the project, what we would do is increase the incoming electric service. So whether we decide to air condition the whole district in one shot or do it over years, do it over time, the electric will only have to be done once. But this is a project that obviously you couldn't put in your general operating budget as a separate line item in the capital. This would be, and I know you guys are in the finishing stages of a bond referendum, so this would be something similar to that, where you would publicize it, go to vote. Once the vote is approved, then you would do the design work, submit to the state education department, and then figure out how to implement such a monumental task. I mean, obviously, this couldn't be done in the summer. And even if we thought we could get it done in the summer, I wouldn't recommend every building in the same summer because you would have no place to have programs. So this is probably at least a 2 to 3 year project, depending on how we implement it and how we phase it. You know, you do the, you know, different buildings each summer. Do you do 2 or 3 buildings a summer? Something to that effect. But that's really the long term, is probably a 3 year plan from start to finish.
3 year, which actually becomes probably like 5 years, 5 to 6 years, right? Because by the time we get it up, the drawings, get it up to SCD approval, or even more so before we get it approved by the community. So we're not, so from today, right? More realistically, it's probably 5 to 6 years from now, could you see some sort of change?
You know, that is a great point, but let's just say, and I'm not saying this, but you know, if there was a vote this time next year, you know, a year to plan it. So in the fall of 22, the one good thing we're seeing is the state education department backlog is 4 to 6 weeks, where a couple of years ago it was 36 to 38 weeks. So it's dropped drastically. The problem is material. We can't get material. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys, you see what's going on in the news, the backlog on material, hoping it will catch up and rectify at some point. But if there was a vote in, I don't know, October of 22, we would want to get the first 1 or 2 buildings done in the summer of 23. And maybe it's a 23, 24, 25 phase in. So 22 to 25, about 4 years. The problem we have with public works versus private work is, in the private sector, if you run out of money, you can go back to the owner and say, hey, we need more money. Do you want to upgrade your flooring? Do you want to upgrade your roof? We can kind of play with it. But the problem with the public sector is we have to do things almost backwards. We have to get the money approved by the voters and then do the work after the fact. So it's my job to get projects done as quickly as possible, because I don't want a project to go 4, 5, 6, 7 years, because in year 6 or year 7, the school that was last to get their work done, there's a good chance it might not be able to get done because you just run out of money, because escalation is crazy and it's impossible to figure out what's going to happen in 3, 4, 5 years. I can't figure out in 3, 4, 5 weeks. I had a couple of schools where we replaced the univents this summer, and I said, just in case, let's leave the old univents in the classroom until the very end. Long story short is we had to reinstall the old univents because the new univents still aren't here. But with these numbers that have to be locked in and approved by the voters first, I want to make sure that we go as quickly as possible to get all of the work done and not drag a project of this magnitude out for 6 or 7 years.
That makes perfect sense. And I think, especially when so much of this project is going to be buying equipment that is going to have very high price fluctuations.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Can I want to ask a question for, this is a board question for all of us, which is that it's okay. So we have the spreadsheet, we have the priority list and the recommendation of the architect. So from a board perspective, is it our job to determine year by year what we should be doing and how that will be funded? Like, how does that, right? How do we turn this entire spreadsheet into a set of projects that are actually going to start to be done?
Well, I think Adam will have to speak as a board, probably in an evening meeting, about what the process would be to raise the funds, whether it was a bond process or something else. What's practical in terms of doing it. But here we would just talk about what the results of the study was, what the priorities are, and then I guess during the budget process we'll talk about the merits of trying to do a bond to cover all of this.
So can I just also chime in? I would recommend that we would have an evening meeting and invite John to our evening meeting, because I think this is, if this board, so process wise, the committee should report to the Board of Education at the next meeting about the presentation that was done and what the committee recommends we do with this information, because this information, I mean, first, I think we should all receive a copy of this presentation, which I think Enemy requested, and we can give it to all the board members. But I think this is a big discussion. You're talking a $65 million proposal that is not to be done, taken lightly, and needs to have a lot of conversation, especially with our community members. I mean, I kind of lived through the bond process the last time. It's not something you do as a board on your own. It takes a while. So I think we should take it to the board meeting and ask for the board on what their, how we proceed. But really, the recommendation needs to come from the committee as what you guys think should be done or not done.
Kathy, am I remembering incorrectly that based on the timing of the bond that we're wrapping up and the bond that we're starting with the private loan that we have, we do have some limitations, right, on our ability to borrow from a percentage standpoint?
You're actually retiring old debt, and then new debt is going to start. So it'll kind of replace that. Right now, you've been doing bands, which are bond anticipation notices to do that.
So when the old bond is retired, the current ban would be replaced with a bond, and then we could do a new ban, I guess, for the work so we would kind of be, I guess, dovetailing.
Yes, you can have multiple bonds that are I don't know how to say it. You can have multiple bonds that have different debt schedules. So you can do that. It's just like.
But from a practical standpoint, we wouldn't, without raising the people's taxes, that would be, we have to kind of tie it all together. That's what I'm getting at.
Consideration, yes.
Can we, would it be too much to ask before the next board meeting or the board meeting that we talk about it? You could give us a little, I guess, presentation or one pager on that, just kind of the timing of the debt we're retiring and the ban and what the implication is to the taxpayers, so we can see where we might have room to squeeze it in.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead, Jill.
Thank you. I also think we have to look at our credit rating, right? Our ratings that also, because if we take on more additional net debts, that also affects our credit rating as well. Or right? Is that correct, Kathy?
Yes, it will affect your fiscal stress. The state monitors schools for fiscal stress. So
that's kind of what I was getting at with that.
Right.
Figuring out the timing, yeah.
Right. So then my other question is the discussion and the bulk of what we saw on this priority list, the priority 1 items covered that $60 million with a few items that were priority 1 that maybe didn't fall in that $60 million. But looking for this budget season, right? If we are going to, as a board, consider doing and taking on this ventilation project, this is a bigger and broader discussion. That will also be something that's going to be handled probably in the fall if we decide to move forward, but we have to look forward to the upcoming budget season. Are there any things on this priority list that would be things that we would look at in the upcoming budget season, potentially putting in transfer capital or otherwise that we could prioritize, even though they may fall under a priority 2 or a priority 3? And John, I appreciate, by the way, your thoroughness on this. And I know you mentioned the track as one of the issues. I know we have some roofs that are still outstanding. Can we have an idea of the cost that we're talking about for some of those priorities or the recommendations of what those items should be, please?
Sure, I can go through that with Jim and Kathy and put together a list. The one thing I want everyone to remember, because building aid is always a factor, is that anytime we do a project outside the building, for example, tennis courts or running tracks, as long as we do a project inside the building, you will get your building aid. So even if we only have, I don't want to say big ticket or small ticket items, but the running track, for example, or the tennis courts, if we do at Schreiber, if we go ahead and we do another section of roof for some other project, we'll want to make sure we get you building aid. So when we look at projects, and right now, the threshold for building aid is an interior project that's in excess of $10,000 in construction costs. So theoretically, we could do an outside project at every building and do an inside project, door replacement, flooring replacement, something like that, and you'll get your building aid. So we could go through the list with Jim again and put together a recommended items for, what's that, 22, 23? Yeah, by all means, we could do that.
Do we as a committee think that that is a helpful thing, especially as we're going into budget season? So
Absolutely.
that would be a recommendation that we bring to the board?
Absolutely.
One more question.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
I think this is for Kathy. So in general, I would imagine that there would be room in a general budget for capital projects. I don't have a sense of what that room is. In other words, some of this stuff could theoretically be absorbed by it. I was just wondering about how much that is relative to what this price is. Because I'm sort of doing this out of my head, which is, right, if we do 65 million over 6 years, that's 10 million a year, but it's possible that maybe we have $1 million a year in, expectations of capital improvements, of which this would fit in.
Well, currently you have 2 million in the transfer to capital.
Okay.
So that's how it's figured. Jim and I had spoken also about possibly doing the ventilation in phases, like doing the electric first to see. But when you look at the cost, it really is a huge project to undertake. So transferring to capital each year, I think it needs to be done as a bond, but that's a discussion we can still have.
Wait,
Kathy, how
can
much
I
is
just
left?
recommend that? I'm
How much is
sorry.
left in the roof projects that we've been using for transfer to capital?
Jim, could you
What-
speak a little bit to that?
The money was upgraded. It was $750,000 a couple of years ago. It was brought up to 2 million for roof projects. That was specifically so we can get our roofs taken care of, because there was talk of a bond a couple of years ago for roofs, but we decided to up the capital so we can get our roofs done. The money that's in the funding that's in the capital right now was earmarked for that. And I had said many times, if we stayed on that course, we'd be in very good shape with our building envelope that we tried to seal for the past 15 years. So it would be nice to continue that course. But again, these other items did come up, and not to downplay ventilation, but the ventilation and this list that John put together was, my thought would to be for a separate project, meaning like a bond or something to that effect. But we
No,
could
Jim,
extract,
I guess the question is, how many years left of allocating that transfer to capital line towards roofs do we have left to finish the roof project, assuming we stay the course? That's what I was.
Sorry. I was just going to continue saying that we could most likely extract some of these projects out of this list and put them towards the capital, but it will take years, and those were prioritized years ago. If we continue on that course, I believe another 4 or 5 years. I'd have to double check that with John Grillo with pricing and materials and all of that.
The ballpark, it's like 10 million left in 8 to 10 million left in the roof.
It's I can't hold me to that number.
Right, of course.
So we will have to come up with a more comprehensive plan if that's the route you want to go. But the 2 million that was afforded to the district from the board was very generous, and it will work if you continue on that process. But this other plan with ventilation and all this other is also needed, and it's something that I strongly suggest a different avenue, not to go into the capital.
I think it would be great if we could, I don't know if it's a John or a James question, if we could ascertain what is in fact left like scope and cost wise to finish the roof project, and assuming we do stay this course, so that we and like any future board knows that that
Gotcha.
transfer to capital item is tied up, and we have to like be assuming in our budget process for, through the year 2025 that, we need X dollars in transfer to capital. to finish the
Isn't that all
roofs.
on this list? I think it's all here.
Yeah,
But
it's
not in that
listed
way.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is.
there's right here, John Daly roof replacement 1.7. There's also at the high school, I believe.
Right there, Kath.
Yeah, 4.9 million. I think that's the only two that are left. No, Jim?
There are, again, like we discussed in years past, roof sections, or there's so many roof sections on each building. I would feel more comfortable going over it with like a fine tooth comb with John and come up, like Adam had just mentioned, to come up with a real plan on how many more years. And that's a great idea and a great plan. This way we can compare the two and stay the course on one way, and again, whatever the board chooses to how the board chooses to spend the money.
Thanks, Jim. I think that would be very worthwhile.
Yep.
To put this to bed. Emily, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just gonna suggest that we do have two lists, because I think that there are projects, and I think it's easy to do. It's on an Excel spreadsheet, so you just basically separate out. The bulk of the $65 million based on this is from the UV replacement and the ventilation discussion. And then there's other projects such as some of the roofs, the tracks, the tennis courts, parking lots, whatnot that I've seen here that is on a separate subject. And I think, you could easily say that the 2 million transfer to capital is what we use going forward over 10 years, to your suggestion, let's say, Adam, that gets those types of projects done. And then you separate the other project, which is the ventilation. I do not believe that ventilation can be done over transfer to capital because it's way too much, and there's way too many other things as well. So I think that's how, in my mind, I separate it. One that is, non-ventilation issues that we can put into transfer to capital, and then the ventilation issues. Or again, I think this is another discussion you have to present to the entire board. The entire board may say, well, no, let's just do an overall $65 million bond next year and get it all solved, forget the transfer to capital in that sense. So I think that's the kind of discussion we need to have as a big group and figure out which way we're going.
I agree with you completely, Emily. I think that's exactly right. And that's why I think, to Jim's suggestion, if we can make that list and kind of get it in a schedule, what we're going to do each year, and then each board and administration each year can kind of look at that and say, hey, we're up to year 2024, this is what we need to do this year, and this is what we need to set aside for transfer to capital. And maybe that's a list that can be kept on a rolling basis, amended, because obviously the landscape will be different in 5 years than it was today, but we'll still need to keep all of those envelope type projects moving forward. Go ahead, Julie.
Dr. Hines is actually ahead of me. He should go.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Hines. I didn't see your hand there.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. Just a quick question. I'm just wondering, at some point, will the board consider really focusing on capital reserve as a means to paying for all this, as opposed to going out for bonds? It's something I know I've been familiar with in other places. I'm sure Kathy has as well, and John too. It's just, the talk about the potential bond, as we're finishing up a bond, probably some people don't want to hear that, even though most of these things are incredibly important for the health and safety of our students and staff. It's just, at some point, I think we really should start focusing on how to grow and increase our capital reserve.
I think the issue with that, and I agree with you, is how do you think about growing your capital reserve when you're already at a deficit? We're operationally we're very tight, and we have all of this deferred, capital work that we have to do. Is what would be the source of funding for filling that capital reserve when we have so many other, I guess, hoses that are open? I would love to look into building it, though, if somebody has a suggestion of how to do that. Kind of in the fiscal situation we're in. Has that been looked at before, Emily?
I hate this muting on this iPad. Yes, we did actually discuss it, but we basically had the same issue. Look, there's one way to do that is you have to just plan for it. You have to put something in savings, right? And so that's basically how we have to do it. As a board, we'd have to decide, we're going to put $100,000, $5 into this fund and just keep doing it regardless of whether or not there's a need and we take it out. I mean, unfortunately, it's just a commitment that you have to make. It's just kind of like when you do your savings account at home and they say no matter what, take the money out of your paycheck first and put it in savings. And you can't ask me about that because I'm really not good at that. But
you can actually set up the reserve and then put funds into it. And if you see in a couple of years you're really not getting close to it, then you can do a bond and use the reserve as well. So that is a great suggestion.
So Kathy, can you talk about from a legal standpoint, like in terms of funding a reserve, what restrictions there are, how does that impact the tax assessment and the levy, et cetera, and what our ability to do that is?
Sure. So you would have to go to the voters to set up this reserve. They would vote to set up a capital reserve for ventilation. We would say that the reserve would go up to $65 million, which would be the most you could fund it, which you probably wouldn't get that close. You might get to 5 or 6 million. And then if there's any leftover funds that are unspent from the current budget, instead of putting it into a different reserve, like a retirement reserve or a workers' comp reserve, you could fund the capital reserve for ventilation. And then once you want to spend it, you again go out to the voters and you get the authorization to use those funds.
Right. But we can't specifically assess the voters to fill that fund, correct? Like it would have to come out of, like, can we actually put a line item in our budget?
Yes, you could actually put a line item in the budget. Most schools, they use their leftover that they haven't spent because budgets are so tight. And
right.
The district does have a very tight budget. There's not much left over. But so it would take a little while, but it's something that it doesn't hurt to have it.
Okay, so I think that's something we should definitely look at
Sure.
as part of this. I think Julie, and let's go Adam and then Julie, I think is the order.
I think Julie was up first, so go ahead, Julie.
Go ahead, Julie, then Adam. But you haven't spoken much, Adam. That's why I was gonna.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Adam. I don't know. Go ahead, Adam. It's fine.
All right, thank you. So my question is I saw a bunch of stuff related to improved heating and then air conditioning. And so those are all capital expenses because we have to actually pay for them. But in theory, they should lead to, maybe if they're more efficient heating systems, we are going to reduce our overall heating budget. And I was wondering if that was in fact true. And the other thing that I know is true is that if we pay for air conditioning in the gyms, we are going to have to increase our electricity budget. So I was wondering if we can embed some estimates, because while those are not capital expenses, they will have to be changes that are embedded in the budget. I don't know if that's for John or Jim or Kathy, but or some combination.
Yes, agreed. That's one thing I've been wondering about too with this. We have additions to the high school that are happening and all of the schools. So what's happening to the electrical costs? I also have colleagues that have done air conditioning. So I'm thinking of asking them, what was the increase in your electric as well? So I can research that. And John and Jim, I don't know if you have any insight.
The electric will definitely increase. I mean, I'm sorry, the air conditioning will definitely increase the electric cost going, and that would have to be an estimate. John, I guess we can work on that together, correct?
It's very, by putting all of your mechanical equipment on the building management system, we can set, because right now what happens, you have a ton of rooms throughout the district that have window air conditioners. They're not to any timer, they're not into anything. So if a teacher forgets to turn her air conditioner off at night when she leaves on a Friday, it could be on all weekend. The one thing that we will is all of the new equipment will be on your BMS. So it could all turn on at 6 a.m. It could all turn off at 4 p.m. So you will definitely have a savings that way. But to Jimmy's point, if we just start to air condition the entire district, obviously our electric and utility bills are going to go up. That's just, that's a given. So there will be some, and it's very difficult to put together a dollar amount to that, because if it's a very cool May, you might not need AC the whole month. If it's this year, I mean, look at people have had air conditioning on until the end of October this year. And it's like a dart at a dartboard. You could probably do something like how much it would cost to run something, per kilowatt hour. You could try to do something ballpark wise, but it's very difficult to figure out exactly what your utility costs will go up. We know they will go up, but how much will they go up based on, the outside air temperature?
So, okay. I mean, so what I would do is, and I do this like for a living, but I would look at the, September and pick one of the schools, and I would just look at how many rooms are air conditioned, and then their air conditioning, what it was there, and then what it was, and
Sure.
then just extrapolate that across everybody. I don't think we need anything super accurate, because obviously it's going to be year to year, but knowing whether it's going to be, 500,000 extra or 2 million extra, I think would be valuable. The piece that you didn't address that I hope you believe there's some savings there is sort of every time I buy a new boiler or every time I buy a new car, it's more efficient and I save money on gas. When we buy these new generators, do you expect there to be any sort of efficiency savings from them, or you think it's just going to be the same in fuel costs?
Well, usually, I mean, even like for example, an older boiler from 1950s versus a new boiler from 2010, even the oldest of boilers are still in the efficiency rating of in the low 80s. I mean, they're pretty good, those old dinosaur cast iron steam boilers and hot water boilers. The univent is going to run. It's a mechanical piece of equipment. I don't know if there's a big savings between the old 1950s Nesbits versus the Magic Airs or the Dakins or the Carriers or whatever univents. They're going to be bringing in that fresh air. They're going to be making that hot air. I think obviously the biggest difference will be on the cooling side. I don't think there's going to be a noticeable difference on the heating side, but for example, if now all of a sudden the high school gym is air conditioned, you might have every summer league and every winter league under the sun wanting to play basketball on a Sunday all day throughout the whole, because it's now air conditioned. And those are just so hard to determine. I think on the heating side, no, but I think definitely we could put something together on the cooling side. What does it cost to run a window air conditioner per hour? What does it cost, or per day? If you had a window air conditioner running from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. versus a ductless split versus a DX coil and a univent, and I could do something like that.
Okay, thank you.
And Adam, I think you have to understand what they're actually talking about replacing. The univents are the classroom, like air handling piece of it, not the heat generation. So, it's basically a fan and a coil on those older boilers. Jim, have you guys looked at like insulating all the piping, especially in the boiler rooms and that kind of stuff? That's usually where you get the best.
It's all insulated. It's
all done, right?
Done. Yeah. A couple of years back with the energy.
That's the low hanging fruit. Yeah.
Sorry.
I said that's usually the low hanging fruit is like insulating the pipes in the boiler room and all that. So I'm sure you did that.
Just for instance, just to give you an idea, Guggenheim's boiler room had no insulation on it. And that room in the winter, you went down there, you sweated, you actually got, so we had everything insulated, and now it's actually cold in there when the boilers are running. So just to give you an example of what we did on a small scale throughout the district.
So Adam, they found all the efficiency in the heat, it sounds like. Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
Thank you. So I actually see we have a lot of conversations happening here, and I'd like to try and bring us back to formulate some of our action items on this one if we can, and also tie it just one other question tied to all of this. So I see that we're talking about a big project that has a potential bond impact to it that we'll be bringing to the board as a discussion if this is something that they want to look at. We're going to break out the spreadsheet that was presented by John and Kathy. That's going to break out priorities that maybe are things that we should be looking at for this upcoming budget season, right? And whether or not some of those items are covered by transfer to capital or not will be a board discussion and based on recommendations, right? And then in addition to that, long-term roof costs will be broken out and possibly included as part of that chart that you're breaking out as well. So Dr. Hines also brought up the idea of the capital reserve and whether or not we as a board would want to look at, if we decide we're going down that route, or even ultimately if the capital reserve is a direction that we want to go, that's another conversation we'd have to have as an entire board. The other part of the conversation I think that we missed is talking about energy performance contracts and any benefits that we could receive from them, as I know that those have been structured differently. I know we currently have an energy performance contract. I think we have about 4 million outstanding on it still as far as debt is concerned. But if there are any benefits that we can get looking at energy performance contract as we look at ventilation. And in addition to that, are there any other creative revenue sources that we can review so that we don't have to just look if the board wants to go with this ventilation project at a full-on bond? Are there any other revenue generators? And I don't know, Kathleen, you've had some great suggestions and some great insights into other creative things that other school districts are doing. I don't know if there's anything, but I'm bringing that forth as maybe something we can look into as well to find some of those generating revenue sources. That's my recommendation. I don't know. I'm just summarizing it because I think we could go down this conversation for a long path, and I'm trying to.
I appreciate the summary, actually, Julie. It was very concise, and I'll probably go back to this when I'm making the notes to report to the board. But I do think that this is our opportunity to ask questions is in these meetings, since we do have Mr. Grillo here, and we're not going to repeat all this at an evening meeting. So to the extent that anybody does have questions, I think this is the floor to ask them because we don't get another shot at it.
Well, I think we'll have a lot of shots at this one if we're going to talk about a $60 million bond.
No, I understand, but like when we're, now, but we have to talk. We have to get our questions answered as we think about what we're going to discuss at the board meeting. But I don't see any little yellow hands raised, although Dr. Hines has his peach colored hand there.
Yeah, I don't know why it's peach.
Because it blends in. But yeah, so we'll go to Dr. Hines and then we'll open up to the other board members and we'll go to the next topic.
Great. John, in your experience, have you noticed a lot of school districts moving in this direction where they're adding air conditioning to every single one of their classrooms or most of the classrooms in large spaces?
Every time I turn around, someone is on a ventilation or air conditioning or indoor air quality. I mean, obviously you can imagine in the last 2 years, it's grown leaps and bounds. But what I have been doing in the last probably at least 10 to 12 years is anytime I renovate a room that has to be, replacing your mechanical equipment, I put in cooling because you just see, all of the IEPs coming in and children needing window AC. So I'm doing it as we go. But I gotta tell you, Dr. Hines, at least, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 room school districts a year are doing some sort of large scale cooling project. I mean, I am in some of the districts, and I can do this for you guys, is back out the big spaces. And what we're doing is maybe a phase 1. I mean, I know it's hard because the phase 1 and the phase 2 are both, very expensive, but a phase 1 is electric service and classrooms and offices. And then if you have your $2 million transfer to capital line item, in your transfer to capital, you could pick 1 or 2 buildings a year to do the big spaces. It is another option. I could, what I'll do is I have univent replacement, I have ventilation. I'll add a third line item here for you to say, like, I don't know, cooling of big spaces. And at the high school, you need the 2 gymnasiums and whatever. And I'll break that piece out for you. you couldn't really do those first because we need the electric service. So I'm going to keep the electric service in with the Univent piece. But then, you know, to your point, if roofs are done in a few years, you could add those spaces on a you know, priority basis or an as needed basis.
Emily, did you have another
Yes,
question
I
on this
did. I
topic?
actually just
Otherwise,
wanted
okay.
to ask, yes, I wanted to ask John. So you said that a lot of school districts are doing this. I'm curious, are you seeing that they're doing them via bonds? Are they doing them via transfer to capital, or is there creative ways that some other school districts are doing these type of projects? I also want us to keep in mind that when the bond that we do have now kind of finishing, all of the new spaces that we have put in do have air conditioning. So there are, and in every building, Jim, right, we have at least one space that will be done that will have air conditioning in every single building. So we do have, you know, it's been, I think, the classrooms that have been our biggest requests and ones that we saw. And to your point, Jim, that John, there are air conditioners in specific classrooms due to children's specific needs and whatnot. So I think it'll be important for us to just kind of keep it in mind and see if there is a difference in the common spaces versus classrooms and what the cost would be. But I'm always curious from you, John, how are other school districts doing this type of funding?
To your point, all three ways. Interfund transfer to capital reserve, and bond. I mean, it depends. I mean, obviously you're a larger district and a couple of the elementary school only districts and, the new Hyde Parks and stuff like that. They have done that. And when I walked with Jimmy in every building, I made sure that we know exactly which big space in every building is being air conditioned or about to be air conditioned as part of your current bond. So I can easily break that out. But, funding sources are an issue. To your point, it is nice that you have a $2 million line item where you could put some of these big spaces as part of a phase two, and I have other districts that are only doing the big spaces. We're only going to, so if you're hot, I mean, you rotate through. So the whole school goes to the cafeteria. It depends on funds available. I mean, maybe you just, it's different for everybody, but all of my clients have used all three options that you guys have talked about.
Okay, great. So normally now we would jump to questions of the other board members. I don't see any hands raised, and we're actually quite long on time for this agenda item. So I see Nan, Rachel, Deb, you guys have anything? Unmute yourselves, and if not, I'm going to jump to the next agenda item.
I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you very much, Mr. Grillo. We all appreciate you coming in and preparing this. It's very thorough. And thank you, Jim and Kathy, for whatever work and support you guys did in preparing that. And I think we have something to discuss at a lot of upcoming board meetings. So,
thank you all. Have a great day.
So item number 2 is, and I think we can do this one fairly quickly. We had a couple of 2 different elementary schools this year had, I guess, pieces of playground equipment that were removed, fairly early in the school year, older pieces of equipment. And we also had, an injury on one of the school playgrounds. So we just wanted to get a sense on what are the state of our playgrounds? How do we manage them? How do we manage them both for safety and longevity? And is there anything that we could be doing to help you, do it better, or not better, more efficiently, or, thinking about what our policies are in terms of as equipment is aging, what we're doing with it. So I had reached out to Kathy, and I believe that, Kathy, I'll give the floor to you. I don't know if it's you or Jim who is going to update us on this.
Sure. So Jim is he's taken a few pictures of some of the playgrounds at the elementary schools. There is a line item in the budget to maintain the playgrounds. That was put in, I think, 1 or 2 years ago. So this is something, usually the playgrounds were funded by the PTAs. It wasn't usually the school district placing them in. So Jim, if you could kind of take us through the process.
Yeah, before I share the, I have again, I put a quick PowerPoint together, which has no writing, just pictures from each building. But just to go back, that the money that was put into the budget was for replacing playgrounds that were affected by the bond issue. So wherever there was a building, like for example, Daly, right now, that addition is going right where the playground is. So that playground got removed and we're going to be replacing it. Salem had, this is where this process was born. Salem, we didn't have any funding in place, and I'm sorry, not Salem, Manor Haven's, excuse me for that, Manor Haven's playground had to be taken out for the bond construction. So at the end, near the end of that process, everybody was wondering what's going to happen to the playground. That's where the funding came about for future projects and that, not for maintenance of the playgrounds. So I'm sorry to be, to say different, but that was how this was all born back then. So as Kathy also said, over the years, and it's not just this district, it's sort of historically in my career, PTAs or the HSAs have always funded playgrounds. It's the facilities department that maintains and inspects and unfortunately has to take equipment out of service when it is in bad shape. And sometimes, unfortunately, it happens quickly. And in order to do that, in other words, to save injuries, and that is the reason. And unfortunately, injuries happen all the time on playgrounds, but we try to be ahead of that. So I'm going to start, and just bear with me here. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show you pictures of each playground in the elementary schools, and we can. I hope that answered your question, Mr. Smith. Did that answer?
Oh, yes. I don't know if was that my question you were responding to.
Well, I'm just trying to. I'm just
Okay.
trying to give an update of history and how we
Got it.
go about playground.
Yeah, no, that was quite clear, and actually, you've been quite clear on that topic in the past. So I actually understood. You explained this to me at the tour of the buildings that we did. So I think that's consistent. So I think the question today is, do we want to continue doing it the way we're doing it? And is there an alternative way to think about?
Okay. The alternative would to be, and again, it's anything the board would like me to do to change my process. I'm more than willing to do. As I go through my list, you're going to see playgrounds that have been in place probably since in the 90s and have been maintained. So and then that's not the norm. I mean, there are some that are brand new. So it's a matter of, if we want to get equity throughout the district, we could start renovating those playgrounds for the board. I'm sorry, not for the board, for the district, not rely on the HSA. So it would be a shift of funding. So just to, for instance, Daly, can everybody see the screen?
Perfect.
Okay, Daly's playground. This back in 2008 when I started, this was an antique playground. Not this one that you're seeing in the picture. I don't have an old picture, but this was supposed to be a parking lot way back. This is going back probably in the early 2000s. There was a playground there that was slated for demolition, but they kept it, and it was very antiquated. This was done. This one was added probably in, I believe, 2010 or 2011. And again, it is maintained by us. And that's this specific piece of equipment that I'm pointing to right now gets the most use. It's some kind of a wave And that requires a lot of maintenance. This piece here, actually a tree fell on this piece, and we were able to reestablish that. It was offline for quite a while. Here's another view of that. So we'll go to another building, and just to give you an idea, Guggenheim. These pieces have been in place for quite a few years, but they are sort of new. I'm going to say within the last 10 years. And then we have, yep, these are all. This piece here needed a lot of maintenance over the years. We were able to replace these platforms. So just to give you an example, if a platform were to rot away, and we would try to get a new one, if that one piece of playground equipment becomes obsolete and or the company goes out of business, this whole piece of equipment has to be taken out of service. And that's where a lot of things happen, where one piece of a component of the playground gets into disrepair that we cannot do anything with it anymore. It becomes unsafe, and it deems the whole piece of equipment obsolete, where we have to take it out. So it's either we rope it off, but what happens when school's not in session, we have kids going on it and they can get hurt. So the best course of action, if we cannot get repairs, remove it. And unfortunately, sometimes things happen at different times of the year where it's out of our control. And again, these are all pieces that, and if you look at these bridges here, it's, if I can zoom in a little bit, those pieces there take a lot of maintenance, and those are the pieces I'm talking about. We were lucky to get this replaced over the years, this one piece of equipment. But again, if that became obsolete, it would take away from the whole playground. This is an example of a newer swing set. There is a lot of regulations on the swings, with the distance between swings and where the swings meet the post. So that's why you'll see, like at Souza, you'll see a swing set with only one swing on it, or two swings, because the laws changed over time, and we had to change the swing set for the new laws, and they just slowly disappear because of the regulations. And that's,
so Tim, this one looks like it's missing a swing in this photo.
It's either missing a swing or it might be folded up.
Maybe the previous photo. Try if you see the previous photo.
Okay. Nope.
31.
31, you said? All right. Let me go zoom out. Okay, that might be, yep, it's probably being replaced. And again, that's something that we may have caught, and we're waiting for, I believe we're waiting for replacements on that.
Got it.
Okay. Here's another example of this is the newer style. If you notice, there's no outriggers on the A-frame type of thing. This is how they're all manufactured now. That's a newer piece at Guggenheim. Here's an example of a piece of equipment that was probably put in when the building was built. There's no moving parts on this, and that's why it lasted so long. We paint it every so often, but the kids use this a lot, and we maintain it as we can. Back to that. Here's another piece that was, again, an old-fashioned type of equipment, probably from when the building was built, but it's still in good shape. Now we're getting to these pieces. These are within 10 years old. This is that wave again, very popular. All these are newer since 2008. Now Manor-Haven, just to give you an idea, so here's an older piece of playground equipment. This probably goes back to the early 2000s, and it's maintained, it's inspected yearly, and it's also looked at every day by our custodians for whatever, a loose piece or something, a sharp edge. And again, if we had to do something, if something major happens to this playground, it would become obsolete and we would have to come out of service. We did replace this chute at one time, years ago. Oop. This bottom chute piece was able to be, you notice a different color. It was vandalized and we were able to replace that. This is something that we're pointing at. This is something that needs to be replaced. But again, this piece will probably put this one little piece of platform will most likely put this whole playground in jeopardy of being removed. So
who would determine when this needs to come out? Is that an insurance question or?
Well, I would start the process. If it becomes something that I can't answer 100%, or if it's not obvious, we would get guidance from the insurance company. But this is borderline right now. Just to give you an idea.
You're saying that when this gets to the other side of the border, this entire piece of equipment is now unsafe?
Yes, it's a possibility.
Right.
And it's this piece of equipment, and it is old. Or we would remove this whole section right here and try to safe it off. So it's this whole piece would come out, and we would try to continue the use of the other pieces as long as it's not structurally has any structure to the rest of the playground. This is a newer piece. This was relocated at Manor-Haven. This was a piece that we were able to save from the old, for construction. We were able to relocate it. Here's another picture of the newer design of swing sets. The newer playground that was just installed maybe 2 years ago. Now, all of this surfacing you see on every playground is refurbished every year. So every summer we order probably in the area of 200 tons of fiber, and that's distributed to every playground to make sure the fall height is correct on each one of these pieces of equipment. So you have an area where a child can fall, and that's what this surfacing is for. It's actually a spring cushion. So we have to maintain that proper height, and that's done all the time. Okay, South Salem. This playground was, I noticed when I know the exact date of this. This was put in 2008. This was put in the first summer I started working in the district, and it is maintained. like we would maintain every other piece of equipment. And then there's the piece that is, I'm looking for it within the, this is the piece that's within the center of the parking lot. This was pre-2008. And again, there's pieces on this that we can get replacements, and we've been, a lot of these little items here, I don't know what they're called, but they've been replaced over the years. This is another example of maintenance. This piece right here, this step piece, wears out a lot. We were able to get replacements for that. Okay, now we're at Souza. Sousa's playgrounds equipment is probably the oldest in the district. This swing set is what I was trying to explain before. If you notice the A-frame type, they are very, the rules changed since this piece of equipment was put in. It's now down to the where you can only have one swing in each bay because of the distances that are needed between these A-frames. This is a piece of equipment that I would recommend to be replaced with a newer swing set where you can have more swings available for the children. This piece was, I'm not sure when. This was probably in 2004. I'm guessing that year. This is a piece that's original to the building. This piece was put in within the last 10 years. This is the oldest piece of playground equipment in the district right here. This has actually John Philip Souza on the side with music notes, and this is challenging to maintain. It's not very good shape. It's still in good shape. But you're talking age and maintenance. This is the oldest piece, probably goes back to maybe the 90s, and it's still usable.
Can you still get parts for that? No.
No. Here's another example of swing sets that were put in. So in other words, this was added, and so this expanded the use of the playground for that A-frame that I was talking about. So over the years, we did add, although we took away spaces for children to use, we added spaces as well. This is a newer piece of equipment in the last 5 years. Another view of an A-frame piece. This is a hand climber. Now these go back probably to the 90s. Again, they're still usable. There are some that are remnants of those, and I'll show you that. Let me back this up. This was some kind of a piece of playground equipment that was installed many years ago, but the structure is still there. This is the infamous fire truck that was taken out of service and taped off. We recently repaired it. and brought this, we give this one more year because the pieces are rotted. And I spoke to the principal at this one more year, this piece has to go, unfortunately. Or we could spend some money to get to refurbish it. It is a favorite. While I was putting these ribbons around it, the children were very inquisitive, and they love this piece of playground equipment. And that is all I have for that. So if
That was, Jim, that was great. That was really thorough. And I think, really gives us a sense of what we're working with. So I really appreciate that. And I think we all see that keeping these playgrounds maintained is a lot of work.
Mhm.
Yeah, Emily, go ahead.
Thank you. I just didn't know what we wanted out of this conversation other than, Jim, thank you for doing a very extensive picture taking campaign. I hope it didn't take much of your time, which is valued, to get us this information. It looks like, I think the question, Adam, that you might want to be asking the committee for direction and then going to the board is, we have, as Jim pointed out, put aside, I think it's $50,000, isn't it, Jim, in the budget? Yes, for replacement based on, it came out, again, for history's sake, it came up a few years back when there was fundraising done by an HSA, at PTA at the time, actually, because of the replacement of equipment due to the bond. And we have already now set aside, right? So daily, for instance, Jim, we are replacing a playground. Like I know the bond is creating a moving of a playground. Is that in our budget code for right now?
we're doing, yeah, it's actually in the bond, and I believe the money, they already picked out a playground, it's ready
Right,
to
so
go.
that's all. So my point was that's already been handled. So I'm not sure, other than the playground that you just showed us a picture, Jim, of, equipment that you thought was maybe borderline needing to be replaced. What is the direction, Adam,
Well,
that you're,
I think the
what
question,
are you
Emily,
looking for?
is, yeah, so the question is, now that we have a sense of what the playground infrastructure that exists, we know that the dollars that are allocated are really for a specific situation, which is where the playgrounds are removed by the bond work. The question is there something that we as a board or a district should be doing different than what we're doing now, i.e. relying on the parent community to maintain these playgrounds?
Well, no, not
Let me
maintain.
rephrase, let me rephrase the word. Yeah, hold on. I was about not maintain, but to pay for replacement. Is that?
Wait, I don't want to stop you. I want to stop for a second because I think what we just saw are pictures of basically, so maybe the question we should be asking ourselves, and it's what kind of Kathy said originally. So, and Jim tried to clarify, is that we put this 50,000 aside for replacement, but maybe we as a board need to say that this 50,000 is for not replacement, because at this point, bond wise, we don't really have any more playgrounds that are going to be affected because of the bond. So maybe this $50,000 that we should be talking about conceptually is for maintaining, not the maintaining of the actual grounds, but maintaining of the equipment. And so when Jim, for instance, sees equipment that needs to be replaced, as opposed to removing it, because that's what he's been doing, maybe that 50,000 needs to go towards replacing it. Do you see what I'm saying? That 50,000 was put as,
yeah,
right?
so Emily, that's kind of the point
Okay.
of the conversation, right? Is do we need to do that? And I think the answer is maybe, and we need to get everybody's opinion on if that's something that we want to bring to the board. Clearly, the Souza playground issues are coming, and it's going to be a big check for the HSA to raise to replace what's there. Right, Jim, you showed us that I don't know what you call it, but that jungle gym or whatever it is. Look, that you said is the oldest in the district, the one with the Sousa notes on the side. That to replace something in that size, that's a pretty significant check, right?
Yes,
I think Guggenheim just spent 30. We just paid for Guggenheim 30 something for something much smaller.
yeah, so to replace that piece, it's going to be substantial. I don't have the exact number, but it's going to be substantial.
Yeah. So the question, Emily, is, as a board, do we want to look at having some type of dollar amount annually that, the superintendent, I guess at their discretion, can use to replace things that exist that need to be replaced and continue using the HSAs to improve the playgrounds, but not look at, as opposed to looking at them as a piggy bank for whenever, something becomes irreparable. And that's what I wanted to bring up is, should the district be replacing things that need to be replaced, or should we continue to have that lie on the HSA? And that's what I wanted to discuss.
No, I completely understand. I just wanted to figure out the 50,000 that is already a budget line in there.
It's
Is
spoken
there
for, though. It's spoken for this year.
this year
They used
going
it at
forward?
Guggenheim.
Right, but
And for Salem, when the Salem does their bond project.
Right.
That's the only.
So-
and those
so-
are the only
so-
years
so
that we
going
put it in our
forward-
budget.
Yeah, we're preparing the budget for next year, this year. So that's why we need to have this conversation, is what are we including in lieu of that $50,000 line? Is it another 50? Is it less? Is it more? And Kathy, this is a transfer to capital item, correct?
no,
Could be, right? Why not?
No, it's actually a line item in the
But
general.
it could be transferred to capital, no?
No,
Oh, it can't? Why not?
it's not a capital improvement. It's really just purchasing equipment.
It's
Got it.
considered site work, I believe, right? Could that be attached to a building project, Kathy?
It could be if it was new construction, I believe.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So we can't use transfer to capital for playground, even though it's infrastructure. I guess it's quite.
It's my understanding you can't. I will look into it.
I think it's
for-
worth knowing the answer to that for certainty. Go ahead, Julie.
Jim, in your presentation, the one thing that stood out to me is the amount of money that the district has spent repairing things so that the HSAs and PTAs don't have to annually replace items. Do you have an idea or a sense on an annual basis, the cost or maintenance costs that we spend repairing the playgrounds? Or an idea, or, I mean, this would be something for us to look at, because if we're going to think that we're going to put $50,000 in our budget as a line item annually and earmark it for playground maintenance, and we find that playground maintenance costs $5,000 or $80,000, we haven't done our due diligence, right? So I think it would be helpful for us to have an understanding of what we're talking about when we're looking at this as well.
I don't have that number right now, but the cost for the surfacing each year is pretty substantial. It's not $50,000, but then there are pieces that pop up, like you say, the minor stuff. I can put that together. I could find that for you and get an idea.
You already account for the surfacing in your maintenance budget already, correct?
Yes.
Annually? Okay, so you already have that built in, and do you build in a number every year for general playground maintenance, or does it just come out of your
It's
maintenance budget?
operating budget.
Operating. Okay.
But I think we should be careful not to mix apples and oranges, because there's the ongoing repair of, nuts and bolts and pieces of platform and whatnot that I think, Julie, you're referring to. And then there's the actual major replacement of sections or pieces of the playground, I think, is what we're talking about, right? Because that's not going to one way or another. The ongoing maintenance is a fixed item that will continue regardless of who's paying for the replacement of the equipment.
I don't know if I don't know. Are those different things? The ongoing maintenance,
think
you
so.
have to replace if you have to replace a platform, isn't that part of ongoing maintenance?
Well, yeah. So I'm saying like ongoing maintenance is ongoing maintenance, and then major replacement of, large sections of the playground or the entire
So I guess,
sector, the entire
right.
is a
So I guess
totally
the
different
question
thing.
is
Right.
how many times are we doing those large section replacements? I think the ongoing maintenance is what we're spending a lot of money on over the long. I don't know. Maybe, I guess that's my question. Are we spending more money on ongoing maintenance, or are we spending more money on replacement of large sections? Sorry, thank you.
That's for me. Okay, the replacement doesn't come out of, historically has not come out of the district budget. It's a fundraising. The maintenance replacement cost, meaning replacement for pieces, not replacement for the whole structure, comes out of the district, my budget. But I do have an idea, if you're willing to let me, if you want me to share. I have an idea going forward, if you'd like me to.
Sure,
Okay.
go for it.
What I would recommend is that we go and pick a year where we would want to replace, to bring everything up to a standard. Maybe pick a year and like say 2000, I don't know, 2015, anything, well, it was 2012, anything older than 2012 should be identified for replacement. And then going forward, have a year of how long something is going to be obsolete after a certain amount of years, and then budget for replacement, similar to we would do for anything else. But again, this is like brand new for a district, because this district anyway. But it is something that's worthwhile, because you're looking, the kids are out there all the time. So you would, just like you would do a roof, you would do a playground after 15 years. I would suggest that we could do a report on that, get an idea of how many pieces and what the cost would be to replace them on an ongoing basis, and use that $50,000 for that. That's my opinion.
So to answer Emily's original question, that's exactly what I think is the action item that we were looking to get to. That's perfect. And if everyone doesn't disagree, I think we can close this topic with that being the action item. Emily, Julie, Adam. Okay. I see Kathy, you have your hand raised.
Sure. Similar to what Jim was saying, I was thinking if you knew how old each playground equipment was, you could actually say, okay, this has 3 years left or 4 years left. And then the PTAs, the HSAs could plan, and the district could better plan that, okay, this piece is coming out, it only has 2 more years, and then it goes. Because then it's not a surprise for the building principal or the HSAs or the students.
Exactly. And I think if we could get something like that in place, I think that would be wonderful. And it would help the HSAs help us, and help us help them. And then we can figure out, once Mr. Restano comes up with what this budget and timeline is to bring everything up to a standard. And I love that word, like trying to find a standard. We can figure out what's going to be practical for the parent organizations to, and then if there's going to be a gap, because, obviously there's only so much each, and we know that the different schools have different capacities to fundraise.
Just remember, this is an action item only to be brought to the general board, right? And so if the board agrees, and also the other thing we want to keep in mind as well is that we have to put this as part of the planning process for the budget going forward, right?
So Emily, I don't think that we need to go to the board to ask
You do.
for Mr. Rosano to make the plan. We need, this
No,
committee is asking Mr. Rosano to make the plan to bring to the board.
Correct.
So when we have that plan, then we would bring that to the board. But we need the plan
Again,
first.
the question, I guess, is what comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? Do you want him to be
Yeah.
using his time if the board doesn't agree?
Well,
So again,
I mean, I don't know what the board would agree on if they haven't seen the plan.
right, I know, like I said,
Yeah.
chicken or the egg.
Yeah. So I think the egg is the plan. And then
Okay.
Okay, great.
Don't drop
So
it.
then, all right. Great. Do you guys mind if we skip the transportation operations, because we're already 10 minutes over? We can push that to the next meeting. I know Kathy, unless you want to do that in 30 seconds.
Sure.
And-
No, we can wait until the next one. Thanks.
Okay. We'll skip any new business, and I guess we'll go right into community comments now. I see Mr. Borda, Mrs. Kane, and Mrs. Chul-Fayan.
Wait,
So,
Adam, I think Nanette has her hand for
oh,
up.
yeah,
also.
I'm sorry. I didn't even see that. It just popped up. Go ahead, Nan.
Thank you. Sorry, I was a little late with that. I thought you were going to ask us if we had questions on this topic. So I just basically wanted, this is a pet peeve of mine. Forgive me for being the troublesome one in the group. I understand relying on our HSAs and PTAs for our playgrounds. To me, I don't understand why we don't have an approach to playgrounds similar to an approach to all of our buildings, all of what is provided to all of our students. this becomes to me not an equity issue in terms of, obviously equity is much deeper and much more important than playgrounds, but it is a, I guess I'll use fairness instead, in terms of what's provided at each building and fundraising capacity, and isn't it our responsibility as a board and as a district to provide all of our children with a proper playground? So I just wanted, I'm sorry to be the problem in the group, but I just needed to say that.
Yeah, I don't think you're a problem at all. And I think that's what we're going to discuss as a board once we have Mr. Ristano's plan. So I think that's a really good and well taken point. It kind of goes to the heart of the conversation.
And Nan is not alone in that thought. This is Deborah Brooks. Nan is not alone.
Rachel, actually, I think Rachel's at an appointment. So I'm going to go to the community comments now. I'm just going to give them in the order that they're showing up on my screen. So we'll start with George.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
We hear you, George.
I would like to thank Ms. Malconian because she basically took the words out of my mouth. I think that when trustees create good trouble, like she's bringing up, is a great moment for the community and the school board. I just want to make 2 points. We are always glad to pay money for the district for the betterment of all the education of children. Have never been opposed to taxes. That's why we contributed, I think, very generously to the Manor Haven new playground. But relying on HSAs, PTAs, and even the Educational Foundation for the goodwill, it creates a system of classes, the haves and the do not haves. I'm not speaking up in the air. I experienced that at Manor Haven when there were those people who felt bad that they couldn't contribute as much as some other people could have. And I can see that we were able to contribute, I think, a decent amount of money, but it should not be. The monies that are collected from the PTAs, HSAs, and Ed Foundation should go directly to a general fund in the district. And the district should use that money to replace or maintain all the equipment in all the elementary schools, which is for the betterment of all children, because you are going to have exactly what Ms. Malconian alluded to. You're going to have, there is competition. I don't know if you guys are aware, the different PTAs and parents say, at Guggenheim, they have this spider. At Manor Haven, you know how much the PTA raised? $60,000, $80,000. We can't compete. That should be eliminated. So that's one point. The second point of the budget, again, I think that, and I'm speaking now, but I speak for a lot of people. We're willing to pay money. We're willing to increase taxes. But, another budget, I forget the bond, it's going to create tremendous pushback. And I think we should spend the money on a lot of these things. Definitely ventilation and things that improve the lives of every single child in this district should be a priority. And it should be explained. I think parents would be more than willing to spend the money on that. But other things, parents are going to say, where is my money going to? And a second point that, again, not speaking only for myself, I believe that a lot of people would be more than willing to spend more money if they are happy with everything that is going on in their child's classroom. If they feel that they're receiving an equitable education, a good education, they don't feel the frustrations that they feel daily in their lives with the children's education, you know what? they are more willing to spend the money. Whatever you guys need, let's build a swimming pool at Schreiber. I believe we should, but they have to feel that they are part of the district, that they are being treated equitably. Anyway, those are my two little points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Okay, next I'm going to unmute Mrs. Kane. And I just want to remind everybody that these comments are we ask that you keep them to topics that we discussed at the meeting today. So go ahead, Mrs. Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at the meeting. I wanted to bring up 2 points that you just discussed, or address 2 points. I think it's really important for the district and the board to make sure that HSA and PTA, hence community support, while the HSAs and PTAs are happy to assist, shouldn't be presumed or factored into the district's plan or the BOE's plan. So you have to come up with a plan on your own and then hope for help. So it leaves me uneasy, and I feel like it left a few other commenters uneasy as well. Also, I'm wondering if it's a question, but I know you probably won't answer it now. I understand why. Is the district, is the BOE, are there plans for a formulation of a capital program type look ahead for district infrastructure to take inventory of what you have and to track upcoming / expected / planned expenditures based on infrastructure, including equipment, meaning playground equipment, just like you would windows and roof replacements. I know there's been a lot of roof replacement talk in the past, but like a 2 and a 5 and a 10-year look ahead.
Did you happen,
just a question
Mrs.
for another
King,
time.
Did you catch the beginning of the presentation? Because that's what we talked about.
I did, but I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't know what the plan was. Is that coming to fruition sooner rather than later? I know it's something that you're going to talk about. You're continuing the discussion.
I think that's the answer. Is it's in process, and that's what we're aiming to accomplish, and what Mrs. O'Hara would like to accomplish, and Mr. Rossano as well.
Okay, so I guess what I didn't hear is if there was a timeline. This doesn't need to be a discussion, Mr. Smith. I just wanted to put it out there that I was wondering when it was going to happen.
In process, I guess, is the answer, but we're as soon as possible.
Thanks so much.
Okay, we have 2 more. Mrs. Chulfayan, I'm going to put you to allow to talk. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, good morning. It's pronounced Shulfayan, Theodora Shulfayan. Okay, I would like to enter my comments as questions. I hope that they are entered in the minutes to be present, available for on our website, Network. Thank you. I'm going to begin with a comment, with a question for Ms. O'Hara. I'd like to know what the bottom line is. I'd like to please know and be able to understand overall what funds do we have right now that are not a part of the bond, and what is your flexibility with moving them in between? I know you discussed that, but I'm not intimately familiar with all your line items, especially what is in the capital and how that's governed by you. But I also had a question for the architect who isn't present anymore, but I would like to answer that question as I will follow up. My question for him was when he did his walkthrough, when he did his long-term, I believe 5 or 6 plans for renovations of the schools, was he also consulting the regulations from the New York State Department of Health and from the New York State Department of Education? Is he aware of the current conflict on state level between the 2 regulations? And so that I feel, to me as a parent, that's really, really important, as well as all the parents that I speak for today here. Now, moving on to, oh, and by the way, this is why it's important that we are able to ask questions and make comments after every item on your agenda, because they just pile up as you have so many topics that you're covering today. A comment for Jim. It's really, really important that our presidents of our PDAs and HSAs are aware of maintenance issues on the playgrounds. A lot of the fundraising that has happened this year did not even mention the playgrounds. I personally, as a parent, have raised this with our HSA and I was ignored. I have complained about the basketball hoops that you may not have seen as you did your walkthrough on Souza, but our basketball hoops are in terrible shape. Also, I have heard from parents that our indoor basketball facilities were hurt during the last storm. And, I heard nothing about this today as well. Also, we as parents want to know how quickly can you remove a piece of equipment that is not functional and that may be dangerous to kids. And also I heard when you spoke, Mr. Jim or Mr. Restano, I hope that's your, yeah, Mr. Restano. I hope that you understand that when us parents hear, oh, it's a lot of maintenance, it's a lot of maintenance. Well, geez, yes, it is. That's what kids do. Kids wear things down because they have so much energy and they do need to play. And we know that
30 seconds.
No, I'm sorry. I'm going to take a little bit more time. Do not interrupt me, please. We
30
know
seconds.
that the COVID-19 mitigation measures have caused increased indoor time for our kids. We see pictures of our kids playing in the gym with the masks on, dancing in the gym, even though that is against CDC guidelines right now. And at the same time, we see the crumbling equipment on the playground. So are you really paying attention to our kids getting enough of what is fair for them? And my last question is, who from the Port Washington Teachers Association was present here today at the meeting? And have they pressured you for indoor air conditioning, something that our children and all of our children do not necessarily need? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we have Mrs. Melwani. I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, Jessica Melwani. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The district goals that have been, and I should mention I'm co-president of Port Washington Parents Council. The district goals that have been shared at the past few board meetings feature a shift toward a whole child approach to education, which includes physical and social emotional needs of our students, for which the playgrounds are essential. They're essential to learning and growth, as are desks and materials and other things that the school provides. So I would echo the sentiments of others on this call who've spoken and said that it's unreasonable for the district to rely on the parent community to fund costly infrastructure that is essential to the educational success of our students and our schools. As Mr. Borda pointed out, Manor Haven did undergo an almost 1.5-year fundraising campaign and ultimately replaced only one of its playgrounds, the one that was destroyed in the process of the bond construction. And it did so at an expense of nearly $100,000. That is simply untenable for most of our schools. As Ms. Melkonian pointed out, this is at heart an equity issue. Our HSAs and PTAs do not have equal ability to raise the level of funds that are required for this type of initiative, and cannot bear the burden of our students' basic educational needs. So thank you, and I hope to see more and more support from the board on this going forward.
Thank you, Mrs. Melwani. Okay, I think that is the last of our community comments, and I apologize to everybody that we went 20 minutes over, and have a great Monday.